sure they'll flow in momentarily. We're asking on the phone lines, by the way, what is your biggest takeaway from NFL Divisional Playoff Weekend? Anthony, you had a good one when we were talking in the break. What's your big takeaway as you look at these final four teams remaining?
I mean, year after year, I think we've constantly seen, offensive-minded head coach versus another offensive-minded head coach. And I know that's mainly happened in the NFC. I want to say I seen a tweet that said like the last 6 NFL NFC championships have featured an offensive-minded head coach versus another offensive-minded head coach.
13 of 14.
Oh,
I believe is the number that Grant put out yesterday.
Wow. So, again, I just feel as though as we, look at our offensive head coach search, maybe that is the way we, we go and we try to lean on, the analytics, the numbers in terms of, rebuilding our franchise. Because, again, what Mike Macdonald's doing with the Ravens defense, it's hard to, go against, considering him as a strong favorite. But, we see the Ben Johnson, we see the Bobby Slowicks, and we see what they're doing in the playoffs as well, and their work of art, the last couple of years. So I think as we position ourselves, it's just something to keep in mind, this trend that, these offensive-minded head coaches seem to, continue to end up in these places. So that would be my biggest, takeaway.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point, and it just, I don't know. To me, offensive coaching is kind of how you shape things in this league. I think a guy like Macdonald's super interesting because I think he takes a very offensive approach to defense. Now, that can also backfire. Its name, the backfiring in human form, is Brandon Staley. I remember reading a piece that my friend Jordan Rodriguez wrote in The Athletic back in it would have been 21, whenever it was that Staley was hired, whatever year that was. And she did this really great profile of talking about how he really challenged Sean McVay as a coach. And part of the reason that he was so effective in practice and part of the reason that defense was so good for LA with Staley at the helm and why I would certainly be interested in hiring him as a DC potentially is, and I actually wonder if McVay would want to bring him back if Raheem gets a head coaching job. The more I've thought about some of where these people could go is pretty fascinating. Yeah. There's definitely a lot of options that are pretty scary with some of the coaches that just got fired when you remember how good they were as coordinators. But anyway, the point is, he looked at how Sean was using a guy like Cooper Kupp and was like, how do I do that with Jalen Ramsey? How do I make sure that I position Jalen Ramsey week in, week out to get the best matchup for us? And the thought was he would go to L.A. across town with the Chargers and do the same thing with Derwin James. And the stuff that they were able to do with Aaron Donald, he would do with Nick Bosa. And it never worked out. Or Joey Bosa. It never worked out. There was other things about coaching defense and about coaching NFL football as a head coach that he just clearly wasn't very good at. But a guy like Macdonald, I think, takes a pretty interesting approach to defense, and I think his success obviously can't be ignored. I also think you can't ignore, for instance, that Anthony Weaver, the D-line coach and assistant head coach for the Ravens, also is getting head coaching jobs. So, does the league know something there? That it's obviously Macdonald's the coordinator, and he's been awesome everywhere he's been. He's come up through the Ravens org. John Harbaugh believes in him. Jim believed in him, and he was awesome his 1 year at Michigan. But does the league know something that there's someone else on that staff that is getting a lot of head coaching looks as well? Versus a guy like Johnson who's kind of yep, nope, that's the guy. Slowick, for instance, even Raheem in LA. There's not the D-line coach or the D-backs coach in LA is not getting a look. Raheem Morris is. So I do think that's an interesting thing that, again, I know it sounds like when I bring that up that I'm doubting Macdonald, and it's more of just that's a question that I would be curious to have answered, and I don't know. And the truth might be that both of those guys, Weaver and Macdonald, are worthy head coaching candidates, and there's a reason why both of them are getting it, and them together is why that team is a superpower, but them apart, they'd be pretty close to as good because they're both really smart. Anyway, I kind of got away from your point of the offensive head coach, but the way you think about offense, the detail you have to think about it, not to mention the continuity that you have to have, or that you can get with your offense and your quarterback, seems like the most important thing. And I pulled up the recent NFC Championship game, so we can go back to, let's see, 2016, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So this year you got Lions and Niners. Campbell's an offensive guy. Kyle is. I mean, Kyle's played in the last 3. Then last year, Sirianni with the Eagles, and then Sean. The Bucks in 2020 had Arians. The Packers in 19, was that McCarthy's last year? Nope, that was LaFleur. Was already there. The Rams and the Saints, Peyton versus Sean. That was the pass interference game.
Yeah.
Eagles and Vikings. I mean, the Vikings 2017 is your last guy. That was Mike Zimmer.
Yep.
That's your one out of the last 14 coaches to appear here. And then 2016 was Atlanta with Dan Quinn, I guess, actually. So maybe it's I guess 12 of 14.
That wasn't Kyle?
No, Kyle was the OC.
Oh, he was.
But Dan Quinn was the head coach.
Yeah.
And then McCarthy was on the other sideline.
Mm-hmm.
And then even before that, 2015, it's the Cardinals under Arians against Ron and the Panthers. Then you have the Seahawks playing multiple years in a row. Obviously, they had Pete Carroll there. Packers with McCarthy, Niners with Harbaugh, the Giants back in the day. Now that we're all the way back to 2011 and Tom Coughlin.
Good gracious.
So
time flies, man.
Yeah, I mean, like, you keep going back, and it's offensive guys up and down, with a rare exception. And especially in the modern era of the league, the last, since 2015 or so, when the league started to get even more and more and more pass happy, it's pretty obvious why those coaches work. And, a lot of them come off the same tree. And it's just the way offense has been able to attack defenses. And I think that part of the reason is, too, and this just goes to, like, kind of how all these coaches think about the game and why someone like Raheem Morris doesn't worry me very much, because I would think he thinks about the game the same way, just from a defensive standpoint, in terms of his background, although he did coach wide receivers and stuff in Atlanta, is they kind of realize that, like, take what the defense gives you is the best way to play. It's like, we're going to build to run the football and then play action off of it. So we're always ready with pass stuff. We're always ready with run stuff. And as defenses have changed and gotten lighter because the league got so pass happy, they've realized there's an inefficiency. Like, so much of success in business, like there's so much of business that doesn't carry over to sports, but there are distinct things that do. And sometimes the best business strategy is just be where they ain't. It's finding a market inefficiency and exploiting it. So it's going, hey, and this is what the Titans did, right? Under Vrabel, with Derrick Henry being the guy. It's like, all right, we're gonna take all these light boxes, and we know that passing the ball is more efficient based off the analytics, but we're gonna build a house of an offensive line that are a bunch of nasty grinders. We're going to put a 235-pound tailback behind them, and we're going to run the ball 30 times a game. And it's going to work because we're going to be the zig when everyone else is zagging. Now, if everybody did that, defenses would adapt. So you have to be ahead of the curve if you're going to zig that hard. Mm-hmm. But what Kyle and his tree have discovered is a way to do both at once. Using the play-action game, using the run game, using personnel, running out of passing personnel, passing out of running personnel, subverting expectations. Like, these phrases that you hear is the basis of how they build it. And I think thinking about football that way helps you build a roster in a way that that you draft a Sam Laporta. You draft a Jahmyr Gibbs if you're Detroit. You find the Deebo Samuels, and you're just like, yeah, I know what to do with this guy. What he's great at. Hey, Deebo, go run these routes, and we're going to hand you the ball 4 times a game. Like, in some ways, it's as simple as could be. In some ways, it's taking a huge risk because you're bucking tradition. You're bucking logic. Oh, you want to run out of run personnel and pass out of pass personnel. Like, actually, no, we're going to do the opposite. We're going to make it the identity of who we are because we're going to constantly put defenses in a bind. Someone who thinks about football like that, to me, is who I want running my football team. And the numbers would tell you that's incredibly successful because you also tend to think about defense that way, and you find guys that have multiple skill sets and yada, yada. But, yeah, I think that's, yeah. Kyle Hamilton, Fred Warner.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you target a different football player, and you see the results. They win. A lot. What was it, 12 of the last 14 in the NFC? I'll look up the AFC number in the break. 301-230-0980 is the Ace Law listener line. What is your biggest takeaway from NFL Divisional Weekend? 301-230-0980. Then Mike Shope joins us from Buffalo coming up at the top of the hour.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.